Happy Friday,
Happy
everybody.
Friday indeed.
It's been a hot minute since I've been in here, so feeling it out. How are you, Joe?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a while since we have been on here. It's
Yeah, I
it.
I took some of the advice of folks and I had someone in the studio reminding me that like rest is revolutionary and I smiled and nodded and then I realized I didn't really sometimes take my own advice. So, yeah, we took a couple weeks off. The news didn't stop, though. There
No.
were some things I was dying to talk about, but, had to walk away, uh, take a breather. But I'm back and raring to go. Lots of stuff to talk about in terms of disruptive updates, but we save that till the end because that is the best part where we give you updates from the grassroots. Some actions happened this week. Police were busy too, obviously, but we start off with the headlines. And I was on your live, Joe, a little bit after the throne speech. I usually am a quiet observer, but I wasn't liking how people were reacting to King Charles and whatnot. So I thought I'd add balance there. I'm sorry I blew it up. Folks
That
should
was
should check it
totally
out sometimes. It was fiery and
yes.
fun.
It was totally acceptable, and it's one of those, as I've mentioned before. Right now, there's a certain sense. I remember talking about this a little while back too. There's a certain sense of attachment, particularly to what's going on in regards to Cardi and everything to go around this. And I throw in when it comes to King Charles and the speech and everything else as part of that because it really is. I mean, he came in. He came in sort of like the knight in shining armor to save everybody, and marketed very strongly as that. Um, Even as I say, and I can explain this to you, but I was having challenges trying to discuss this with anybody else because they got very defensive in saying that in many
No,
ways Cardi came in as the same way as Trump, shining guy from the outside, going to change this. Is he the same as Trump? In the way he's marketed, yes. His values obviously very very different. I'm not saying they're equal in any ways. One's clearly a horrible person. The other one is also can be viewed as that, just not the
packaged a little
same
better.
overtness. Just one's concentrated business, the other one's just concentrated on just being absolutely terrible to everybody. Um, but it's still, it's still what it is, and some people are not ready to view that as a terrible thing. I think one of the messages that we learned is, and even I was trying to push back on was they wanted to see Cardi for at least get on there to try it out. Like it's true, but you're going to see it's going to be the same thing, and we need to start thinking about like why do we keep doing the same thing? So
And expecting something different. I that
exactly.
was the theme I heard a lot of people, you're
Mhm.
not hopeful that he'll do this, that, and the other thing. And I was actually taken back that people are in this spot mentally again. But it's, a brand change does a whole lot for politics, unfortunately, right? The credence we leave or we give to leaders
Mhm.
is part of our downfall. Uh, and that's why I don't really have any patience. I'm not about to give, a Wall Street banker a few months to see what happens because it's not even about like wait and see. He's been pretty forthcoming. And I think the throne speech gives us a lot of hints and then just straight out overt statements that tell us exactly what we have in store for us. And it's nothing, to be hopeful about. Like he's not masking it. It sounds flowery, but we're gonna kind of pick it apart at the top of the show here before we get into some other headlines. You can see them kind of scrolling along the bottom. Save my voice from telling you what's coming up. You can just read it. But yeah, so let's just get into the throne speech itself. I mean, the fact that the king came to deliver it. We touched on that
Yes.
before the break. He announced this long ago. We wanted people excited that the king was going to come and deliver, which is like his mandate, right? He's supposed to in the throne speech tell Canada what he has in store for folks. And he gave a very similar mandate letter to all his ministries too, which we got to see, unlike Doug Ford, who hides his mandate letters. I mean, I'm not that I'm trying to give Carney any credit there. I don't do that, but he's very forthcoming in what we can expect, and I think having the king say it sent a message in itself. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we should at least, whether we agree with the messages or not, we should at least reward transparency, like compared to hiding the mandate letters where it's just a secret plan. Being open obviously is much better because at least we get to see, so we can address that. And again, being open doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to say everything. Sometimes they're hiding a couple things in their open statements.
Yeah, like if you're not paying attention, there might be some things you didn't notice. And then there's things like you don't know what you don't know. He
Exactly.
doesn't have to tell us anything in the throne speech. It doesn't have to be all that forthcoming. So the fact that he was so forthcoming should tell folks that you don't have to like sit around and wonder anymore. So let's get into it. Like a lot of themes of nationalism, militarism. I like over and over battles were referenced, the ties in history to the British military history, which is colonialism and imperialism. Like they were hearkening back to even the war on terror
Yeah.
and that the border. More RCMP officers was mentioned, beefing up, reinvesting in the military, and they gave some examples. We're going to want people to get excited about helicopters and ships and yeah,
Homeborn toys.
yeah. European, even though he's still giving contracts to the US, we know that, we've talked about that, but it's with a new coalition of countries with Canadian values. We heard that over and over again, Canadian values. Charles even lists some. I wonder if you can cue up the Epoch Times clip where he kind of goes off on, moving away from the type of partnership that we had with the US and finding ourselves in this moment. And yeah, I think it just kind of speaks to the mindset of going into, they call it trade wars, going into battle, an economic battle of sorts, but, obviously not without a very strong military. So it had some fashy feels to it. I think there's some red flags that we can point out. Do you have that there?
I think so. Give me a second here. I had it queued and then I
It's
lost
about
it.
6 minutes in, and
Yeah.
he's talking about staying true to Canadian values, and as the only way to kind of come through this. The irony, though, of having the king deliver this, a few of these themes, right? Like the
Yep.
nationalism and trying to assert some sort of sovereignty, while the sovereign, right? He says those words, the sovereign, to remind us that we are not actually sovereign. He is the sovereign. And also having him sit there and talk about houses under $1 million.
I've got it now.
He probably is like, am I reading that right? Are
Yeah.
there people live in homes under $1 million, $1.5 million?
Exactly. Well, actually, I don't think he's ever sort of dealt with that period. I mean, his homes are just, he's never really purchased a home. It's just always been those. Here we go. Oops.
Yeah, Joanna, totally. There's a few red flags. This is just going to be one of them. He We talked about how fascism, or at least I was on the skeptical leftist, and that's where we were talking about fascism often makes demands of people to like get through times, like do it for the country. And there were a few references to that, like that, how we all had to, kind of buckle up for the country's sake and come out of this as a superpower. That was he's trying to soften it by saying we would be like kind of technological wizards coming out of this. We're going to invest in green energy, but those aren't the projects that he talks about ramming through. He talks about the pipelines a lot as well, but you're having issues over there, technical difficulties,
I
Joe?
am. I
That's all
am.
right.
Unfortunately, that the script is not quite working right here.
All right, if you pull it
Um,
up, we'll talk about it.
yeah.
But you know what
Yeah,
bothered me on your
time problems
live
here.
was people fawning over the king.
Yes.
Right. Oh, his French. They were all surprised he could speak French very
I would.
well, and
I was a little surprised about the French part. I have to admit, as a Frenchman, the French came out. It was more of a, oh, he can speak French. I wasn't sort of like, oh, completely as aghast by it, but it was definitely caught me off guard. I think mostly because uh, I've rarely heard King Charles speak until he became the sovereign. He's spoken it into interviews and everything else, so it's very. It was kind of surprising to actually hear him speak throughout the entire thing. But also his French was also surprisingly good. And again, not surprised in the sense of, he probably had a very good education. Probably did, as Joanne's pointing out, did go to a fancy French prep school, fancy prep school in general. His educations would have been pretty on par. But beyond that, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
there's no. It's not the weirdest thing I would have. I'd say.
No, but it was just there was a lack of kind of class recognition in the room. You know, a
Yeah.
banker had written a speech for a king to deliver, and people were kind of shocked that they had all the time in the world to know how to speak French and deliver speeches. Like, that's literally the only purpose that he's serving at this point. And the royals in Europe are all related, and,
Oh yeah.
family and land ownership isn't exclusive even to the UK for those folks. So it's, yeah, it was getting folks to fawn over monarchy, and like now we're even seeing on social media, progressives, that's such a weird definition now, but people that have similar takes some of the time are talking how the monarchy actually humbles people, and it's definitely not a priority to get rid of it right now, and it's like this warming back up to royals, as though they differ all that greatly from oligarchs, as if they don't rule based on, their own priorities and maintaining power and whatnot. So it's like, yeah,
But
it's the same with Carney. We've kind of forgotten that we hate bankers.
yeah, and it's, I mean, the argument, and which is true right now, which is the monarchy right now in regards to Britain doesn't really do anything in regards to power anymore. It doesn't, aside from it existing. His speech, like, he was just a the voice to read off Carney's words. He didn't do much more than that. Like everything he said wasn't Charles's. It was one of those things I actually found kind of interesting, because they said usually at the beginning of the throne speech, whether it be the governor general or it could be Charles himself, to actually sort of say a couple words. And I was kind of expecting him to say something in regards to the Commonwealth and unity and how that's going to be working together. I was kind of expecting to see, like, to say, like, the Commonwealth stands with Canada in these difficult times kind of messaging. Didn't get that. I was kind of surprised. They didn't get that.
No, because like
Yeah.
that isn't its role, right? That would be kind of probably considered a little out of bounds for the throne speech. The only
Hmm.
thing that's supposed to come from the deliverer is a greeting, like the greeting and the land acknowledgement.
Yeah.
But like, if you watch the broadcast and you're not familiar with politics, I wonder if some people think that Charles wrote that. That he had a
Oh yeah.
tete-a-tete with, Carney's people to get an idea of what they wanted, and he wrote that. And that, that becomes less obvious when it's the king delivering it, as though like the governor general. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah. He wrote
especially
none
the
of it.
way he was able to deliver it. He did add little tiny bits where it seemed to be coming from him at the beginning, at the end,
Hmm.
that he was so grateful. But let's hit on the acknowledgement, the land acknowledgement, and having the king up there talking about reconciliation. Um, it was like the climate change. They were just talking out of both sides of his face. And right at the very beginning, like I'm talking 30 seconds in, he's greeting, and what does he say there? It's shared history of a nation. Why is
Yeah.
a nation is significant? Because that is not the understanding of any of the treaties, that it was a coming together of a nation. It's like Canada is a nation state, and then there are many indigenous nations, right? That is the goal of reconciliation, to recognize that level of sovereignty within those nations, right? And self-determination. But that wasn't the language he was using. And
I
then
have the clip. I do have the clip for the line.
okay, good. I'm like, because I've got quotes, if you don't, like, I can go
Yeah.
through it, because they were red flags to me. But
So,
politish.
so
And
I
this
can.
isn't his speech, but, well, I guess this
Um,
might be actually Charles's words. Let's hear it.
so you guys can't hear
As
that, can you?
cringeworthy as it is to listen to the king, like, I didn't think I'd be airing King Charles on my feed.
Absolutely. All right. So let me just
So I
turn that on
apologize
so I can
in
actually
advance.
play that. Here we go.
For
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
okay, can you stop it there for a minute?
This is my
Yes.
So he uses that language again, right? He's like, your communities, and then collectively as a country. And again,
Yeah.
that's zero recognition. These are his words at this point. And that is just, yeah.
I'm not sure if they were his words or if they were put into the speech, because I mean, the speech is written by Carney's people, and and the king
Even,
does get the sign off on it.
yes. So, like, but you would figure someone delivering the land acknowledgement would have a higher hand. Like, this isn't part of the mandate letter, part of the throne speech, right? An outlining of what they're going to do. This is still part of the greeting. So, like, you know, and it doesn't even really matter, right? Whether it was Charles's people, approved by Carney's people, or collectively. So many eyes went on choosing these very deliberate words, right? Where they, not nations plural. Joanna in the comments there flagged that as well. And like, that had to have been the most cringeworthy land acknowledgement I've ever heard, even without it being read by the king. But being read by the king, who's calling himself the sovereign, I wonder how that hit with indigenous communities.
So I mentioned this a little bit before. So after I did jump into a live with somebody else. Somebody else was indigenous there, and the question that came up as to how they're feeling about it. and this is one person was there, and so this is no sort of bearing regards to the entire community, but their particular view on that is something similar. I was kind of curious about, because I thought it was the same thing too. I saw it at first, and their reflection was agreed with me on this. At first, it was surprising to even see the line acknowledgement coming in, but it felt to them. They said it felt kind of. Um, it felt performative. I think it was the words that they were using,
Yeah, I bet.
and to them it felt like it was performative, but didn't really. And because of it, didn't really mean much. As in, like, that's great. What about addressing the issues because of all this? You know.
Well, that, and you sit through the whole experience, whole 26, 28 minutes of it, and you hear Canadian values driven home over and over again. And the other theme, who talk about militarism over and over again, and strengthening the borders. And then there is a portion there where it's laid very clear at 11:50, if you want to pull up, there's a section there where they're talking about the economy and prioritizing the economy. And I think the quote there is, the overarching goal of this government is to build a strong economy. And, you know, for folks that are struggling materially, I can understand that if without a basic knowledge of how capitalism works, that might sound like it would benefit you. But he doesn't ever actually explain beyond like this middle class tax cut and the ridiculous housing proposals that how all of a sudden in an economic system that has historically and functionally designed to draw wealth from the working class and up to the 1%, like, you know, like this, a strong economy doesn't actually translate into a better life for me and you. That's the language of bankers and capitalists. And I thought we had gone beyond taking that. Like, usually they try to mask it in, we're going to make life more affordable for you. But they're not even pretending that that's the case. So, and he talks about how he's going to make this strong economy here.
Its overarching goal, its core mission, is to build the strongest economy in the G7. That starts with creating one Canadian economy out of 13. Internal barriers to trade and labour mobility cost Canada as much as $200 billion each year. The government will introduce legislation to remove all remaining federal barriers to internal trade and labour mobility by Canada Day.
Yeah,
numerous premier.
I think he goes off. Did you want me to continue on that one?
Yeah, because he talks about speed being of the essence here, and I want people to understand he's talking about pushing through pipelines.
Taken
Okay.
vital steps to break down provincial and
Like,
territorial.
as a side note, I don't know
barriers
if folks can
to
really hear me
trade.
over this, but the whole provincial trade barrier is just
Together,
nonsense.
We will build on that
Yeah,
progress
I want to bring that up in a minute.
to deliver free trade across the nation.
Conservatives will say red tape. The liberals will say this.
Essentiel.
This is critical to unlocking Canada's full economic potential, but it's not enough.
Right, here we go.
To build Canada strong, the government is working closely with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples
They're always
to
mentioned last.
identify and catalyse projects of national significance. Projects
Pipelines.
that will connect Canada, that will deepen Canada's ties with the world, and that will create high-paying jobs for generations. Given the pace of change and the scale of opportunities, speed is of the essence. Through the creation of a new major federal project office,
Okay, you can cut him off. I'll
the
explain
time
what he
needed
says
to
next.
approve a project.
All right.
So he talks about reducing the amount of time projects are going to have to need for an approval process. You know, he promises that, you know, that's Carney. I say it's Charles delivering it, but whatever, that's his problem. He shouldn't have delivered it. But you're going to get painted with these words anyway, that it won't bypass any environmental assessments. It'll still have, you know, robust protections for, towards climate justice, and there's some tokenism towards renewable energy, but those aren't the massive projects. They're not talking about wind farms that are going to connect all of the provinces and go through Indigenous territories. And when he made his speech when he won, he really drove this home again. He did it in the debate while everybody was watching, said that, you know, I will consult with Indigenous people, but it's to a purpose. Speed is of the essence. We are getting these projects done come hell or high water, you know, regardless of what Indigenous groups say, because we are a country, right? A country, one nation. that should be a red flag for all the environmentalists out there who are sitting there holding their breath.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I keep thinking back to Yves Blanchette's message, which was, everybody's, he's coming hell or high water and talking about making the East-West pipeline. And Blanchette made an excellent point, which is, that's great you want to do this because, you want to address the issue of trade and trying to get oil out as soon as possible. But it's still going to be an issue of like 12 years to build this goddamn pipeline. Like, by the time it's done,
Why are
is it
we
even
building
still going to be
pipelines?
needed?
Yeah.
Let alone the rest of it.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
it's a failing business, right? So we've already had to pour billions and billions of tax dollars into these pipelines that are already a problem, let alone what will cost to build a new one. And it's like ends up being a private profit built by public dollars. And now a relations issue, Indigenous relations nightmare. Because, like reading Joanna's comment there, I do believe that this is foreboding. Like, remember, he's reminding you that there are Canadian values and Canadian priorities, and you're gonna have to let up something to make this nation great again, so we can be a superpower. He's preparing people mentally to have to swallow some values.
Yep.
They're going to walk back every bit of faux reconciliation the previous Liberals have done, right? Like, I don't care what gains you think have been made, how many boil water advisories have been lifted. It was still mostly performative, but now the performance is over, right? And it's going to happen a little bit slowly at first, but this language, he's making it very clear what his plans for the economy are, and it's pipelines. And, they do go on about green energy later in the speech, but that's never part of the major discussion. They are just like throwaway statements he makes throughout, and climate justice, right? Like he says it, but there's no plans for it. There's no actual plans for it.
There's more details that's being heard in regards to these pipelines than there is in regards to any of the green energy projects. In fact, there's not really any green energy projects that they're talking about. There's just literally, as you said, just afterthought statements of like, oh yeah, and we're going to work on some green stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
One other red flag towards, Indigenous reconciliation and whatnot is the calling politicians custodians. Right, custodians of the community and the economy, and that's kind of seems like a deliberate choice of words because it came like immediately after the land acknowledgement, right? So it was like, oh, I acknowledge we're on unceded territory, but then I am the sovereign, and these here I'm looking out at all the actual custodians of the land, and it was. Yeah, it wasn't even. I thought that Liberals usually do a little bit better at couching their language, but I guess they see what works south of the border, and as much as they like to pretend that they're the antithesis of Trump, there are a lot of similarities, especially if we're talking about border control. He threw fentanyl in there, even though the Liberals themselves had walked that back, saying like fentanyl is not coming through the border. That's not really what border security is for. We'll give you a SAR, but I mean, that it just seems kind of ridiculous. And now it's just like one of the selling points, right? Oh, one thing before we move off from the, I gotta find it. I think it was right at the beginning. You don't necessarily have to find the clip for me, but he quite literally is talking about Canadian values and the coalition of like-minded nations. And then he goes on to basically define neoliberalism. So I know a lot of people gave us pushback. I don't know why. With the banker and his ties to Wall Street, and neoliberalism is like hyper capitalism, and like, but they quite literally do that right there in the throne speech. Say like these are Canadian values, like trade, trade partnerships, and spreading of their type of democracy, and I just thought that wasn't lost on me as someone who follows politics, but it was sounded like the textbook definition one would give for neoliberalism. I can't find it now, but yeah, I watched it live, and then I listened back to it before we came on here just to remind myself, and having time to nitpick the language there, knowing someone wrote it, right? It wasn't like off the cuff comments, was maddening, right? I was like, oh, there's a storm coming, and they're still cheering about this victory, right? They're still going in the comments, oh, imagine Pierre Poilievre was there. Imagine he wrote that speech and how awful it would be. And it was like, you don't see any red flags in that speech? None?
No, there was, there is a bit of blinders, as I mentioned, and as you observed, obviously, in regards to how people received that speech.
Yeah. Yeah, the Rearm Europe plan, nobody thought that was like, what? We're going to spur on the Canadian military industrial complex? Sorry. What?
Yep.
Why? All the, and that, analyzing that speech, and then having shut down CANSEC happen just this week was kind of like, I imagine the peace activists there had something to say about that throne speech. 1,000 more RCMP officers, tightened border security, all sorts of military spending. So he tweeted out, Carney, you're all going to have, I don't remember what the exact quote is, I should have pulled it up, but, basically, you're all going to have better lives because the government's going to spend less, so you can invest more. Anybody out there investing? I mean, don't answer that, because I'll cry. Like, nobody that I know is able to invest, whether or not you cut our income tax or not. Like, that seems so out of touch with where folks are at right now. But yeah, people are just swallowing it up. Let's move on. Do you have more for the throne speech, or there's a
sort of? It's a bit of it's kind of related to this, and it's I just wanted to point it out because, again, right now because it goes very much with the border thing you were discussing, and this is kind of a bit of a random article, but there's very important context to go with this. So just recently, about a day ago, I want to say a day ago, there was an operation at CBSA. Apparently, they seized 1.73 kilograms of fentanyl and 60 kilograms of other drugs, including meth, cocaine, that was heading towards, apparently it was heading towards the United States. And you're going to see this particular thing repeated over and over. Like, see, we've got this is the big drug problem, and we're handling this, and look at this, look at us go, blah, 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 blah.
It's like a fentanyl false flag.
It's, they're look at this. And so also, I want to point out something very important, because this article just pointed out here. These guys are going to talk about the 60 kilograms of fentanyl. There wasn't. There's 1.73 kilograms of fentanyl. That's it. That's all it was, plus an additional 60 kilograms of other various combined. But they're going to be using this raw. I'm going to be honest here. 60 kilograms of narcotics. While it is significant to a certain level, it is not a huge haul compared to some of the stuff that these guys have seized. This is not the drug problem of America. 60 kilograms would barely last 5 minutes to cover the entire America, let alone, to be the problem that's overpowering the United States. So, but it doesn't matter. They're going to just send the message and just say that's what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they just blow some of these stories up. Anything to do with migrants, right? Even the Liverpool car attack. Yeah. It was immediately, they were just assuming who they were going to find behind the wheel. And then when that happens, it's like radio silence, and obviously not terrorism. So, What's next on the agenda, though? Let's move past feds. We're got to go to the provinces and then cities. So let's start with Ford. We'll kind of get smaller and smaller in jurisdiction here. But Ontario, has Progressive Conservative Premier Doug Ford again. And he is back to slamming omnibus bills down our throat.
Yeah.
I don't have all the details for Bill 5 and Bill 17. We did cover them earlier when they were brewing. They do have updates, but I'm going to save that for next week because I didn't brush up enough because I was busy covering Bill 6 and the resistance to Bill 6. That is, what's the euphemism they are calling this one? The Safer Municipalities Act. I hate the way they name these bills because they're anything but this really does target encampments. The biggest resistance you're finding to this is folks organizing around encampments. In Toronto, that's the Encampment Justice Coalition. You see Diana Chan McNally photo in the article there. They're pretty newly formed. There was a day of action, though, yesterday. So that's May 29th. Folks in Toronto, again, pictured there. Kingston had a good turnout. Ottawa and Port Hope. So I might be missing a city there as well. I mean, if you know of another one that happened, let us know. But if you're in those communities, just know there's folks organizing to that end. And they were out in pretty good numbers yesterday. They were also out at the legislature the day before. And now, I mean, the press is still trying to confirm what is going on. But folks were trespassed from the legislature for protesting outside of it. It's a 24-hour ban on coming into the legislature if you've protested outside of it. And yeah, so Diana Chan McNally, there's an Insta link there, or X. Yep. Rather, she explains what happened there and why she wasn't able to be in the legislature when Ford starts, passing motions that don't allow for public consultation and really just slamming this bill through that would give police greater powers to arrest, amongst many other things. So drug users, and it specifically targets people's intents. Right. So it allows them more leeway to make assumptions about what's happening in the tent and detain them and then trespass them from the park they're living at, which is their community. And so then they can't come back. And then the fines increase and the penalties increase for folks going back to those same places.
Yeah. And it's also, it's a ridiculous thing because, I mean, you're finding people who have no money to begin with. So what's the point? It is a bit of a ridiculous thing. We'll get more into it, but I have the clip first.
Thank you.
So you're going to like this. We just had a rally to rescind Bill 6 outside of the Ontario legislature today. And what we were told is that if you are outside the grounds of the Ontario legislature and you are engaged in a public demonstration, you now have a 24-hour ban from actually entering the building. So this government today deliberately is passing Bill 6 right now as I'm speaking, and they've enacted this rule so that after our rally, we are not allowed to go inside the building and disrupt the proceedings or even watch them. They are preventing us from going in to watch them pass the legislation that we are actively rallying against. So one of the ways in which the Ford government is limiting democracy is using tools like this. So you're going to like this.
Yeah, so that's new. The article that you posted up earlier says, media was trying to confirm with Ford's office when this law was passed or when this new security protocol was passed, because it is quite common for organizations to rally at Queen's Park the day of or the day before a big bill is expected. It sends a message and, it has a lot of purposes. And so they're directly trying to limit any kind of public participation, both through the motions that they're passing in the House and by locking the people who would have something to say on the record or just chirping from the gallery. It doesn't really matter. Public still has a right to be in there, right? So that's a development in itself, as Bill 6. Kim's comment there. I know, Kim, I would love to talk about Bill 5 again, but I don't feel fully versed, so we are going to hit on that. A lot of resistance to Bill 5 as well, though. I will say that the NDP, I hate giving them credit for anything, but, they made a big splash about it. They got extra eyes on Bill 5 this week by attempting to filibuster it in the legislature. So, maybe, Kim, you'll have to hop on next week and give us an update on that and Bill 17. A lot of environmentalists have their eye on, so we're watching the feds a lot. We do have a new government and a lot of changes happening that are promised by the summer. That's one thing I didn't mention in the throne speech. They give dates for a lot of things. He seems to want to move fast, right? Speed is of the essence, but the premiers are not to be outdone. I don't have it in the notes, but just a fucking honorable mention, a dishonorable mention for Premier David Eby. I never know. If anybody could tell me how do you say that, if I actually care, but I don't. That's the BC NDP premier. And I saw a statement, it was shared again by the Wilderness Committee, but it was from some Indigenous nations that have been dealing with the provincial government there. And the quote there was like, the era of trust is over with the NDP. They are similar to Carney, taking this stand of like, in order to make us more independent from the United States, energy-wise, we need to push through pipelines and mining contracts and all kinds of resource extraction on unceded territory, through unceded territory. Fuck what Indigenous people say. So they're just completely derailing the NDP brand if it still had one, right? And Indigenous people have just kind of given up on trying to deal with them at the table because it's just been nothing but faux consultations and lack of respect for Indigenous sovereignty. So the themes, right? We see the conservative NDP and liberal politicians at work in the first bit of this live, and they're all really up to the same stuff. Ford too is passing. One of the reasons he's doing Bill 5 is for more resource extraction projects, mining, grassy narrows is one contention point there that we've talked about. And so, yeah, it's a big, big push for energy projects and whatnot. And we're all supposed to be very thankful for it. Let's go on to the bubble zones. And then we'll do CANSEC for folks that are watching all the things to come up. You never know what order I'm going to throw them in. Neither does Joe. Keeps him on his toes.
Yeah, it's just always kind of interesting. Trying to keep up, like, what slide do I bring in next?
I wonder, anyway, we have talked about the bubble zones before, and if you want to throw up my Substack article there, Joe, I wrote about it on our Substack like a month ago now, because it was imminent. The writing was on the wall. I mean, they were in the middle of public consultation at the time that was overwhelmingly against it. We also found out that Toronto city lawyers advised against major aspects of bubble zone laws. We don't know exactly what, because they have decided to keep those sealed. Why? Because we can expect a charter challenge for sure. So, bubble zone laws. What are they? I keep sometimes forgetting the what, why, where, when, how, So what are they? They are exclusion zones for protests. You've seen them before around healthcare providers that do abortion services, right? And trying to protect folks trying to access those services from harassment and violence. I would argue that we don't need laws for that, but you have seen, these are what they are. We've also seen them applied to healthcare facilities at the onset of the pandemic. They still stand, where people were harassing healthcare workers, anti-vaxxers largely, were trying to make it harder for them to go to work. So it's not without precedent that the authorities have laws to allow them to infringe on your charter rights because of a need for safety, right? Like, this is why our charter is so weak, because there's so many exceptions in it. And this is one of them. And now, though, cities are expanding, and the feds have promised to do the same to back them up in the criminal code, to put bubble zones around churches and schools and community centers. And Toronto actually has a process where facilities or organizations can apply to have a bubble zone put around their facility, whether it be permanent or temporary, and that would allow police greater powers to remove protesters. It would also increase, like, there's fines of up to, I think, $100,000 for the Toronto bylaw. So this is done and did for Toronto. It passed. The mayor, Olivia Chow, largely supported this, fed into the narrative around it for quite some time. So that shouldn't surprise anybody. One thing that did sort of surprise me, that really made, when I tell some of these stories to my partner, my mom, before we go on, just to kind of test the waters. And I was like, what's fucked up about this one, though? I told you folks can apply to, have a bubble zone if they can prove, I don't even think you have to prove much, but you do have to meet certain criteria, that you're likely to have a protest, that you fit the definition provided as a place worthy of the exclusion zone and whatnot. But there were penalties in there if you made a false claim. And one of the counselors put forth a motion to remove those penalties. So there would be no consequences, and like publicly telling everybody there will be no consequences if you apply to have a bubble zone and you don't actually meet the criteria, or you lie, you lie on your application about how likely it is that you'll, have violence at one of your events, or whatever the criteria is. And that passed. So there are no consequences. As if they would apply them anyway, right? Like, we've seen how bureaucracy works, and how they treat the powerful, and the way lawyers can argue that, maybe there was no intent to lie, blah, blah, blah. But that actually passed. It was a slim. Chow didn't actually vote for that. I don't know why I'm trying to give her credit or, leeway, but that wasn't something most of the counselors supported. It was like 14-13, I think it passed or something. So, but that's great. So no real repercussions there. In my article that I wrote, though, and from the advice of like the community legal defense in Toronto, there's already bubble zones, and not even the ones I was talking about, like not anti-abortion, against anti-abortion protesters. Cops already kind of decide where you're going to get close to and where you're not going to get close to, where we're going to just like remove people, whether it be catch and release or just charge them with mischief because I don't want them here, there, or the other place. They were already doing that. This does provide them with extra penalties to throw out and throw at folks. And there are aggravating circumstances that'll happen there, but it's not that it's like we could protest wherever we wanted to anyway. So I don't know if that helps people accept what's happening, but what's the state with Ottawa's bubble zone laws? I haven't, you all going to pretend to have public consultations, or is it a done deal already?
So, as it stands right now, this is from press release about 2 weeks ago from Horizon Ottawa, saying the press release with some concerns met with amended bylaw as committee caves to public pressure. Community will continue to fight the bylaw in regards to the zone, as well as let me see here. The latest update in regards to it was about, I want to say, 2 days ago. And it's a post by Sam Hirsch from Horizon Ottawa himself. And bubble bylaw feasibility study that passed at committee last week just passed at council, and only 3 councillors voted against. Sean Devine, Sean Menard, and Jessica Bradley. This doesn't mean the fight is over, but all other councillors need to face a lot of pressure. So yeah, it's coming to Ottawa too, because yay.
And I understand the community fights back. Horizon Ottawa is a great organization for folks living in Ottawa, especially when it comes to municipal politics. We'll be talking about Sam again in another topic, but actually, too, I saw him at shut down CANSEC as well. Very busy
I
week.
chatted with him for quite a bit. CANSEC right at the end of it. But yeah, no, he's for Ottawa. He's usually at quite a few of the events. He's quite involved. But yeah, no, they've been working on this particular bylaw because again, we know this thing is going to be problematic. I'm not surprised that this thing got pushed pretty hard by our mayor. Chow is, I think for you guys, Chow is a bit of a surprising disappointment. Our mayor Sutcliffe is not a surprising disappointment. We really expect him to do terrible things. He's been quite open in regards to his priorities. In regards to this bubble zone, not surprised at all. He'll put it in under the guise of protecting children in regards to schools, but throwing in the churches and community centers. He's been very much a supporter of Zionism. If anything, the example last year when Ottawa's Pride made a statement in solidarity with the Palestinians. The fact that he was one of the first voices to voice against that particular move spoke volumes, absolute volumes.
Yeah, the stage is being set for quite some time, and if folks are on X anymore, I mean, I am, but you'll see Ben Mulrooney going at it with Stuart Benson, a politician that covers, or a journalist who covers politics, and they're going back and forth about an event that, and Eve chipes in as well, but another event inside a synagogue that was this time not selling stolen land but raising money for the Israeli military, and they are framing it as, Ben Mulrooney sitting there framing it as Jewish people being harassed at their place of worship. So this is largely what's behind these moves, right? It's to provide, in this moment, a shield for these activities to happen and be protected by law, and to just greater empower the state, right? Whenever they can frame any kind of crisis, whether they give a shit whether or not we harass the JDF fundraisers and whatnot, it's a power grab for them, right? Anytime something happens and the state can grab more power, they will, right? Whether they think they need it or not, and then it's on the books for when they need it against the convoyers or whoever. This is why we never cheer on these developments, even when we feel like they're being aimed at our enemies, because they are our tools for our oppressors nonetheless, right? So we all have the same ones. They're just stupid and they're punching down instead of up, but the same people still oppress them and will throw them in jail for protesting ridiculous things. But speaking of arresting people, so the bubble zones, like I said, are already a reality for folks. One of the events this week was at Shutdown CANSEC. Joe, you were there. CANSEC is a North America's largest weapons convention. They show off tech. Canada likes to feature how innovative it's been in war machines, and it draws, cops, military folks who buy stuff, so military representatives, not just Canadian military, but a lot of militaries, including the Israeli military. So it was drawing war criminals inside. And every year, even well before October 2023, the folks at World Beyond War and other peace activists have annually been showing up outside of this convention. It's been going on since like the late 90s or something. I can't remember. But I did have it in my notes earlier. But so this isn't yet an annual event, but obviously the focus this year is on Israel and the arms embargo people are demanding, an actual two-way arms embargo. So, Joe, how early were you there? I mean, they do try to shut down access to the event, which starts pretty early. So they asked you to be there at 7. What time did you get there?
I got there around 7 o'clock. So
Good for
the
you.
funny thing is, when I got there, I was told I was supposed to be, we were going to be there, and we're going to be there early before the other people show up, because we said we're supposed to be there for 7 o'clock to watch for other particular people. We got there and it was around 7. It was 7 o'clock, and there was already a fair amount of people. But to be honest, um, there was a fair amount of people in regards to protesters there. This is a kind of a view in regards to this as we were there earlier on. This is around, I think, around 9 o'clock when the second group came in. They were able to block off one particular street. Behind me, from the shot I'm there, because I'm facing south towards the airport, behind me there's another line. So there was 2 lines in total that were able to block off really, really well the entire group, and it was interesting the way they were able to do that. But as the event was progressing, there was a good sense that there was a little bit of concern, as there was an increase of police as they were going through. Um, and it was a concerning amount of police. And obviously, as the event went on, it got to a pretty concerning point. I'm trying to see if there was, as the lines were starting to get a little bit more aggressive. Um, Particularly when you start seeing things like, like when they start bringing out the helmets is when you start getting a little concerned. Overall,
Yeah.
it's never a good sign. But and this is when we were watching, because the lines were starting to be made. At a particular point, we started seeing the lines getting into place, and this one I think is pretty much the most telling one of them all. This is when they started getting to a point of kettling. So this is a line that you're seeing right at the front. There is a line of police behind, and then there's one on each, and then there's also lines on the sides. And as soon as they kind of closed in all the police there, they shoved everybody to a small group, and then they started shoving. And this is where the arrests are coming in. They shoved and they pushed people from their side of the line to the other side, and then the other side would just grab the people that got tossed towards them and just arrest them. Now, from my understanding, I didn't get much clarity in regards to that. I've been trying to get some clarity in regards to the arrests. I know they're all out now. I believe there might be 1 or 2 that are charged, but beyond that, I haven't been able to get much more details aside from that.
So I didn't queue up the audio, but I did pull G from the Orange Hats into the studio. She was outside of the jail support as it was happening. At that time, she reported to me that 11 people were arrested at the actual protest, grabbed in many of them from the kettling incident, and at least one was arrested at jail support. They were sitting down beside someone who had been injured by police and tried to help them, and they were just hauled out of nowhere. So they did set up jail support outside the precinct holding the arrestees. There were charges, according to police, so I don't have details from within the community, and I hate repeating police reports, so I won't repeat all of it, or their claims against folks, but they did report charges of mischief and assaulting police officers. So that's what happens. Like, they'll push you, they'll corner you, they'll cram you together, and then the second you make contact with them, because of the circumstances, they will flag you for one of those charges. Mischief is just simply for being in the road, and over and over again, those charges are being thrown out because it isn't a mischief charge to protest, to block traffic. That isn't something they're allowed to arrest you for. It doesn't matter, though. This is about punishment of process, right? They want to round these key people up. You know, there was 100 people there. They arrested 12. That is a huge ratio. And they are going to, I'm not saying they did, because I'm not going to flag anybody who was arrested as this, that, or the other thing, but they will try to get people they think are the organizers or who people are looking to, as well as anybody who makes physical contact with them, like, at all. But the most helpful thing that people can do when like this is happening is to film the police actions, because the reason the charges are often dropped against folks like this, who still have to deal with all the headaches of being charged and arraigned and held and bail conditions, they are able to defend themselves against these charges or get the charges dropped because there's footage of the police initiating the violence. So I have an example coming up when we talk about Casa Loma, which was the day before in Toronto. Same war criminals. So, you know, I imagine Buddy Gillard or whatever was over at CANSEC as well, I can imagine. But, you know, there was Israeli war criminals being hosted and lauded at Casa Loma, and protesters showed up there as well, obviously. And, you know, shit went down there as well. There were 2 arrests. An Israeli embassy staff assaulted one of the protesters, then came back out of the event and pointed them out to cops, and the cops just grabbed them and arrested them, even though the person being arrested was like, I didn't hit them, they hit me, and other witnesses were saying the same. They were then arrested, their name was released, their age, and the circumstances of their arrest, you know, were all made public. So, you know, footage, I imagine, exists that will show, that will clear this person.
When it comes to seeing, you know, as if a Zionist or an Israeli is approaching you, same thing as police and everything else, camera on, filming them, because they're going to do something. And if not, if anything, they might stop trying to do something because they see a camera and walk away. At worst, they do something, but at least you have the evidence so that when they go into it, yeah, they'll still arrest you, but you can embarrass them. And again, it's going to take repeated amounts of embarrassments towards law enforcement and to the powers that be, that you can't continue to do these things. We have the proof, and it's, you know, you're not going to be able to do the change unless you're able to show them just the crimes that they're doing and they're trying to get away with.
I've just got a video from the event, from Shutdown CANSEC, posted up by World Beyond War. They are, you know, live at the event, and they explain also why they're there and doing what they're doing. So I thought we'd give them some space. Is there no sound?
Corporations like Elbit Systems and Lockheed Martin, who are directly profiting and complicit in genocides across the globe, including the genocide of the Holocaust. So we're here to call on shutting down CANSEC. Can you hold it for me? The world's biggest weapons companies are here, as well as delegates from the Canadian military, from the Israeli military. Literally, the biggest war criminals in the world are here, and we're here to say, shut down CANSEC. Stop arming and profiting from genocide. We see the bombs falling on Gaza, and we see you selling them and producing them. Shame on you. We're here to shut down CANSEC, shut down the arms trade. Arms embargo now.
So that was Rachel Small of World Beyond War Canada, you know, explaining exactly why they're there. I mean, the idea is to eat away at the arms trade globally. So World Beyond War is got branches all over the place. If folks want to get involved with them, they are largely behind the arms embargo now. You hear her use that slogan at the end, the movement, which I'm just going to pop into their disruptive update. The arms embargo now is, you know, going at a fresh government. So they've got a campaign called Mandate. So armsembargonow.ca/mandate. I think I have it here in the notes somewhere. And they're encouraging folks to go to your MP and deliver that message that you want a two-way arms embargo. So they have petition resources on their website, as well as emails and things that you can print out or, you know, deliver virtually as well. And it's just like a fresh push at the Liberals, who have been fucking horrendous since taking office on this point. They have issued really weak statements. I know they're part of the trilateral statement that everyone is using and getting really excited about. But at the same time, they're doing absolutely nothing, not about the arms embargo. And in fact, we saw many of them march with I March with Israel in Toronto this week. It's an annual event where all the Zionists proudly go up and down the street and declare their undying support for this genocidal occupation. And you know, the usual folks are there, but some new Liberal MPs made sure to be seen there. Leslie Church, again, another dishonorable mention for that one, just reveling in her new persona as top Liberal Zionist. And quite disturbing to see, folks. Also, the sponsors for this piece of shit, like they're all like kind of like the who's who of small law firms or bigger ones, insurance brokers and whatnot. But then Fabricland sponsors this stupid walk for Israel, as well as LIUNA, which is a trades union in Ontario.
I'm so surprised Fabricland still exists.
They do. Okay. And I guess they're both fabricated lands, right? I think I saw someone put that pun up on. I can't take credit and I don't know who to give it to. Maybe it was Sarah, but either way, it's a little poster. They put all their logos on this fucking poster of "We support genocide." So I've obviously saved it for future reference. But yeah, so again, folks can visit the armsembargonow.ca to get more involved in that campaign. Obviously, they don't just do petitions and letter writing. They do direct actions like the ones you just saw, and beyond, that's for sure. Ottawa police were in that last story. We've talked about them like bubble zones. Notable, like they created a bubble, an essential bubble around that event, even though it's at a public space, right? It wouldn't even qualify for bubble zone protection based on the criteria that at least Toronto adopted. But still, the police created one, arrested people that they thought were being mischievous within it. And yeah, so it's just a kind of told you so. Here's what we mean when like the bubble law or no bubble law. This is how police behave. But it's not the only way they misbehave. You've got an example of them facing lawsuit, yeah?
I believe so. Yeah, where did I put that?
I think that's Horizon Ottawa probably spearheading that again, or
I believe so. Let me see if I can find it here. Whoops.
So
yes, there it is here. Nope, that's not the one. Sorry.
It's all right. So Sam Hirsch had a status update there that I can share.
I'll have it in a second.
Okay. Okay, so it's the 613 and 819 Black Hub and the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project. Is that folks that are fighting back against the Ottawa Police Services, the board, for restricting public debate?
Yes. I did have that one. I don't know where the link for that one is.
It's okay. I'll put it up. There we go. So yeah, Sam shared this here. And they filed it in August 2023. So like these legal avenues that organizations take to eat up a lot of resources and take a lot of time, but it looks like there is development, right? So they're finally going to be heard, or they were already heard. Do we have updates from this?
Oh yeah. So here is, tomorrow is the first day in court hearing. More details. There's a full progress article in regards to it. In regards to the original thing. And so the article is about a year old as to the roots of it. So the roots of it has to do with the fact that Ottawa Police decided to work to change the rules in regards to how you can participate in the oversight of Ottawa Police, to make it much more difficult for outside groups to get involved. And so they were suing them. I believe Horizon Ottawa was also part of this, but it's also 613-819 Black Hub. as well as Black Students Leaders Association. Accused Ottawa Public Service Board of using sneaky procedural rules to keep critical voices away from police board meetings. So they did get involved into it. I'm not sure where the case is right now.
It's at Small Claims Court. Is that where it's being? That's what the article says. It's being held. How strange.
It's a new lawsuit over country. Because it is a civil suit. So small claims does seem a little bit weird, but it might need to start there. It might go further than that, but it's got to start somewhere.
That is
trying
really
to see
strange.
here where they're. Wait a second.
I wonder, like, they're not wrong, right? They're not wrong that there needs to be like public consultation and public participation, and like transparency is probably the most important thing, because they don't actually listen to public consultation. Even like I interviewed some folks from Ontario Education Workers, right? They're with Labor for Palestine, and they gathered like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of delegations to Ontario school boards talking about anti-Palestinian racism, giving examples, systemic evidence, and like nothing. Crickets. I mean, you see public consultations and delegations given on the bubble zone laws, right? And like folks could write in, they could participate, they could sit and watch the proceedings. Same with Queen's Park, getting locked out of Queen's Park. But like all your chirping in from the gallery, it seems like some wasted energy a lot, right? Because they're not listening. The media doesn't give you a lot of airtime even for these, outbursts or delegations. You prepare mentally for them, you expose yourself publicly, and then not a lot happens from them. So, I wonder where this lawsuit will go, but, I understand the importance of maintaining some level of transparency at police board. I think that's self-explanatory. I just, it is a question of resources and value, because like they launched it in 2023. It's 2025 and they're just finally getting their day in court. So
it is. It looks like it's. I'm assuming it's still ongoing right now. There's no update from anybody in regards to this right now.
All right.
So I'm wondering if maybe they're still trying to negotiate, trying to figure out what they want to do, or they're still. They might still be in also just case management. So I'm not sure where they're at in regards to this, but and I'm just trying to catch up there. But it doesn't look like there's much updates either from Horizon Ottawa or from Sam as to where they are with this right now.
Right.
Except for that they're just right now in court. So
we'll see if we can get an update.
More. Yeah.
We'll see if we can get one for the next show, or I imagine if it's a good one, we'll hear about it from Sam and the community groups that are closely involved in Ottawa. But let's move on. Those are our headlines. I mean, they were peppered with moments of resistance, obviously, because we try to talk about news that seems pertinent to the movements for the most part. And but we like to not end the show. The second half is disruptive updates from the grassroots. And the first one is an interesting one that I also need to know more about. So I'm dying to pull somebody from a community trust fund into the studio to explain exactly how it works and the successes that they're having. And, the most notable one in my mind is the Kensington community. Land trust. So they are in the news this week for buying their second building. And this building it's mixed use. It has commercial and residential. But what they do is, they do not obviously, and you can't, evict the tenants that are there. But they're going to ensure their housing is under $1,000 a month. So this, again, it's the second building they've done. The last one had 12 residential units. This one has 2. And, when I say under $1,000 a month, the market rate in that area right now, like their goal is to bring the whole market rate down by doing this at scale, like scale it up constantly, is like $2,150. So we're talking like this isn't affordable housing. It is, but it's way below market. And they gathered the funds through the community. So it's community owned and cooperatively managed for the ends that the community decides upon, right? So they get their funds through the community, through grants, through all sorts of means, but also by acquiring actual property. And when we talk about building housing or acquiring affordable housing, this is one way that you can do it, where it is public housing, not public as in the government gets to control it and decide how well it's kept, right? Toronto's like some of the worst landlords out there, but it's by the actual community. So good work being done in Kensington there. Folks can, I'm going to share their website in the comments if it lets me. And you can learn more about what they do. They've also got links to the Canadian Community Land Trust organization that helps people start them and operate these land trusts. I need to know the details, like how they kind of decided they would go this route. This comes from like a very robustly organized community, right? Kensington community is notorious for kind of mobilizing in numbers, being very targeted in their actions and successful. So yeah, no, Kim, I agree. That is great news in Kensington. And then it was even greater news to know that there was like a whole national coalition of community land trusts. So it's not this weird anomaly that only exists in Kensington. But yeah, so these are just like one way people can mobilize power from below, right? Like we ask our governments to build housing, but this is another route. We don't have to go that way.
There's some buildings in some places that are, that already are capable of housing. I mean, we know there's a lot of units in different places that are just not being rented there because they're being kept as investments. Freeing them up in like this by being purchased by community housing and turning them into community housing where it's a reasonable rent, it's going to change a lot of people's lives.
Absolutely. And it sets a precedent, right? So, in that neighborhood, you can get a 1-bedroom apartment for $950. So the same way that the landlords operate like a cartel, artificially raising rights. That's why I get into arguments with people, respectfully as possible, about supply and demand on housing. Simply just building more units. It's not like most items in the market with this invisible hand, but that regulates itself, right? Supply and demand dictate the cost. With housing, everyone needs housing. You absolutely need housing. You can't be like, oh, it's just too expensive. It's like, you got to make it work or you're going to be without home, right? And that is not really a viable solution, especially with the attacks on encampments. So, it's really fascinating to watch people find other ways, not just talk about them, but get them done. So if they can do it, we can do it. That's the spirit, right? Let's go on to our next action. I kind of briefly mentioned it, but I think folks should get a few more details. And Socialist Action actually posted up a decent article. Barry Weisletter wrote it. Let me see. I'm going to share it with folks. No genocide in our city. No genocide ambassador in our city. So again, lots of people showed up to this outside of Casa Loma, which is like a historic landmark in Toronto. They were having an event inside a fundraiser for a Zionist advocacy group called the Abraham Global Peace Initiative. Peace doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, right? Same, remember we had a couple Israeli embassy workers at another fundraising event in New York, was it? With, goals of bringing both sides together to bring peace to the region. It's bullshit. Anyway, so Israeli politician Gilead Erdan was there amongst other people from the Israeli embassy and notable Zionists. And, you know, here Barry reminds us, he writes here, he's notorious for tearing up a copy of the UN Charter, like someone just dripping with disdain at international law. And there he is at a major landmark, just completely being celebrated. He wasn't just an attendee, he was like a featured, he was part of the reason people were there. And it wasn't the war criminals that were arrested, but peace activists outside were arrested. And, you know, again, the event was labeled as being disruptive to Jewish culture and being anti-Semitic. And the reality was people were very clear in what their message was, you know, that you had a war criminal inside. Here's some photos from outside of the event. Oh no, it's not sharing the same page I'm on. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have something there?
I had it up. That's why.
Good.
There you go.
Okay.
Control now.
I'm like, I'm scrolling, and I'm like, I don't see it. So, again, this is Socialist Action here. It just reminded me when I saw their logo pop up. Socialist Action lost a comrade this week, and I just wanted to give notable mention to Mitchell Shore from Ontario. He was a longtime member of Socialist Action, and I had met him on a couple occasions. Always so very, bright-eyed and helpful and welcoming. He lost a 13-year battle with brain cancer earlier this month, and folks were in the middle of honoring him this week. And I mean, right up until the end, this gentleman fought for a free Palestine and amongst many, many other things that Socialist Action gets up to. I don't often agree with some of the tactics, and, I've talked about them in the past, but they are full of good people that are working to the same end we all are. And yeah, they lost a comrade this week. So if you know anybody in Socialist Action, maybe reach out and just acknowledge that loss. They're a big family over there. So, yeah. That was Mitchell Shore. So, just kind of back to the event here where their organization was there. So, it's organized by Palestinian solidarity groups. They put public calls out, right? So, if you folks are following Palestinian Youth Movement, Pali Action Canada, and all the other local groups, you will know about these events that are happening ahead of time. Like, you don't have to be kind of on the down low. There are a lot of events here that folks are like open calls for, like there's going to be a war criminal hosted in our city. No, they're not. Right? And show up in as many numbers as possible to make that happen. Joanna's comment here, I don't like using the border or immigration laws, but I get where you're coming from when she says he should not have been let into the country. I mean, we do have, what is it called? Crimes Against Humanity Act. We do have the means to arrest war criminals for what they do under international law here in Canada. Apparently, it's only limited to, he promised to arrest Netanyahu if he came, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. I mean,
there's Netanyahu and who else was the other minister there? Both of them, they've been named by ICC or ICJ. So those ones would be arrested. He doesn't have any outstanding charges by the international courts right now, so there's no reason. I mean, yeah, you and I can probably come up with a list of reasons, but there's nothing they can point to going, well, these guys are asking for you to be arrested. So it is very, I agree, should be arrested, but they do need, again, they're going to be doing very much on the politics in regards to who they're going to arrest. Again, Joanna, I don't disagree in regards to there's much that can be done, but when it comes to these guys, it's not, they'll arrest us for almost any reason without a problem. Yeah. These guys, no, unless there's something that they can save their ass by pointing to, like, well, it's the ICC and ICJ. The Hague is the one calling for it. It's not really us. They're not going to do anything.
I mentioned we will talk about documenting police, and we've talked about it a little bit here in the past, so sorry to kind of jump around there, but I forgot to share this call out. from, I'm not sure who put it out, the community, we'll just say, we're not going to flag anybody in particular, but they are obviously looking for footage of these two police officers. Oh, where?
Oh, I've got that.
Can you pop me up there?
Oh, you want up there? Okay.
There we go. Okay. So here, they don't need identification. They know who these police officers are, but they're wondering, you can forward it to us and we will forward it to the group that's asking for it, and we can keep you anonymous or we can put you in direct contact with them. Looking for footage from Casa Loma, which is May 28th in Toronto, of these police officers. Okay, sorry, they know who this one is. They need help identifying this police officer.
Yeah.
And, or any footage that allegedly led up to the first arrest at Casa Loma. Before the arrest, not during and after. So folks were there and filming and got some of what they needed, but in order to defend some comrades, they're likely going to need some more evidence. So if folks can take a look there through their footage, if you were in Toronto, and again, this is reasons why you always film police movements. It's not necessary to film attendees, but any interactions with Zionists or facility staff or the authorities, obviously. So, and this is why. So we don't have to do these call-outs. They would have already had this. But I imagine the Orange Hats were assisting the folks there as they were at CANSEC. They wear pink hats in Ottawa, and those are legal observers. Yeah. At the end
it's not pink hats, it's pink vests that they wear.
Vests, yes. G said she had a pink skirt. She was trying to fit in there. Legal observers are almost like a necessity at this point when especially if you're organizing a large action. You can call out to some of the local community groups, let them know when and where, give them some lead time, and they can lend you some legal observers. Even better, these folks are training a lot of people on how to do it. That's G was down there kind of helping folks out. I'll run that in the bottom there about the Orange Hats.
Yeah.
But what other shenanigans were people up to this week? There were some updates. The JDF is trying to sue the CRA to get their charitable status back. And I think they're in a position to issue receipts at the moment because of the court ruling. But I saw this. Thank you. I was like, I'm reading it out loud going, what do you mean they granted them charitable status? I can understand there already have been charitable status for some of these groups. But here we go. We've got, again, the Palestinian Solidarity Network and its friends advocating for folks to pressure the CRA. You can scan the QR code there to get to their campaign. But it's basically a paramilitary group or a vigilante group. Two of them, charities, where are my notes? The Shamrim Toronto and the Megan Harut Canada, or MHC. So both of these folks can what charitable status allows them to do, if you didn't know, is give tax receipts, which means you end up actually paying a portion of their donation, right? Because they get it back in a tax return and like a certain percentage based on political donations, you get a lot back, but charitable, it takes away from the income that you can get taxed. Anyway, in the end, that means the government ends up being complicit in their activities. And in turn, we are complicit. So there's been a lot of work being done to, at the very least, some of these organizations are doing illegal activities like recruiting for the Israeli army or raising funds for the Israeli army. You're not allowed to do that on Canadian soil, whatever Canadian soil is. Okay. It's just a term. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, bleh. But you understand what I mean. You can't do that in another country. And they do. But at the very least, stop them from being a legitimate charity. Not that some of these folks actually care about the tax receipt. It can't stop them from raising money. It's not like you can't stop being a charity. You just don't have the added benefit of being able to issue a tax receipt and getting, subsidized to a degree.
It is a significant incentive for people to donate those. So that is something that's going to, that makes a huge difference. Like, absolutely, you need to get rid of it. They should not have it. There have been successes in the past in regards to some of the charities that were funding directly towards Israel to lose their CRA status. So I'm optimistic these guys are going to lose theirs too if they can provide the evidence. But yeah, let's definitely put the pressure on them to at least on CRA to get rid of it, because they shouldn't have it.
Yeah, and with all the bureaucracy that's involved with the CRA, you think that they obviously are not doing any kind of due diligence when it comes to issuing these statuses or revoking them. The effort has to completely rest with community organizers who are already overspent, right? So that's frustrating, because surely there's supposed to be mechanisms in place so not just anybody can get charitable status. And when a genocide starts happening and international courts start making rulings, why we know why, I'm not actually perplexed, but you should be enraged, why that doesn't trigger a whole set of things like this, like revoking charitable status, issuing arrest warrants. If you're going to tighten up the border, tighten it up against war criminals, right? Like, they don't, everything relies on activists to come forward and say, here's what you should be doing, and trying to create enough pressure points for them to do it, or at least acknowledge they're not doing it and give us a reason why. But Joanna's comment there, I think she's upset we went through all these arrests and we didn't talk about a notable arrest that I was probably purposely avoiding because I don't like talking about them, Joanna. But we do occasionally. It is sort of news, but people might not like my reaction. I messaged Joe. I was like, okay, so people are like, what are they talking about? We can't have an inside joke. Sure, I'll bring it up. Do you have something you wanted? Okay, all right, go ahead.
So this is the individual in question that's been arrested. There's, in regards to details as to what the arrest does, what you could overhear in the video clip is it was allegedly an outstanding warrant. An outstanding warrant is the reason for that, and I got this in an email from Peel Police, and it's as far as I was able to get in regards to information in regards to the arrest. As well as they said, it's still an ongoing investigation. We tried to get some more details, but unfortunately, there wasn't very much that they're willing to share right now this time. So all we know is that they were arrested and then they've been released, and we're assuming on their own recognizance. But beyond that, we don't have much more details than that. All we know is there's still an investigation going on, and as soon as we find out more information, we'll be letting you all know.
I will note that it is ironic, but not, that we didn't get a public release the same way we get with Palestinian solidarity protesters, who almost immediately trigger a public police release, sometimes with their photo. Sometimes a lot of details are given, and the repercussions, we obviously know what they are. And in this case, we don't. Occasionally that happens when someone is working with the police. Yep. So this individual, for folks who are like, I have no idea of the significance of this, there is a journalist. I will allow myself to use this word because people probably think I'm not a journalist, right? And I'll be like, well, there's no gatekeeping here. So someone who identifies as a journalist in Toronto, Karima
Assad.
Thank you. We've talked about her on the past. This is her camera person that goes around on a scooter. You'll see him in that helmet quite often. You probably notice him at a Toronto or Ottawa area event, videographing everything, doing everything we tell you not to do. I once came across this individual. I didn't know who they were at the time. Filming in the face of a young woman we had just pulled from the grasps of Toronto police. Or York police. Anyway, they were all working together there in Thornhill outside that synagogue. And we had pulled someone from them, like from between the police's legs, like underneath, and away to safety behind the line, relative safety. And he had followed and put his camera right in her face. So someone like possibly wanted by police. And I'm assuming he was live streaming as well, right? So like no editing, no idea who's watching that or, you know, what you're revealing, and giving her no space. She was hysterical. She was upset. Air. We wanted to give her air and water was our priority. And like, this is the kind of person that we're talking about. However, and like, I people could probably have like, Karama apparently has tried to put peace bonds against all sorts of people in the community, failed miserably, long record of sharing their footage with police, corroborating with police, platforming right wing. I mean, the list, the laundry, there's a whole I should have had a Twitter site ready for this. Maybe Joanna knows what it is, where they just kind of expose these folks for who they are.
Yes, SP411 star. It's the entire place is threaded out. There's also a link tree that's available. I believe it's actually one of the there's one of the URLs you can actually bring you to it. But yeah, if you want it's somebody's made a link tree that's got the entire list and the whole thing. I can share it out here so that you can actually go through and take a look to their history as to who they are. And it goes from the start in regards to all the way back to one particular thread that was made by somebody called Misfits. And then SP411 stars 5 particular threads, and it's all rolled up, at least in the web version, so you can see it there. And yeah, there is a lot of history.
There is, and it's like, kind of, they're a cautionary tale. You do have to warn people in the movement about them because they are very good at kind of coming into the space. And we're often, this is no shade, like desperate for coverage, right? You're often holding these actions so more people will know about what's going on, right? So the more cameras on you think perhaps the better, the more reporters talking to you, the better. But like, this is not that, right? They demonize many of the people involved with the movement. They dox people. They, you know, you have people in the comments, Joanna here, saying they came to my house. So like, I get why some folks are seeing them as their nemesis, and I'm not going to argue with that at all. But I do caution folks against, you know, using, all right, you want to dox somebody, you can dox them, right? I am not against doxing as a tactic at all, but not for like police action, right? It feels good to watch our enemies get arrested, especially if they feel like they're, you know, you're not safe around them. Like, I can get that. But they're quite literally using these same tools against us, right? And people shouldn't have really harsh bail conditions, right? People shouldn't be locked up without having a trial. People shouldn't have their name blasted across their whole community because the police decide to gather them up. Right? So there's like so many other ways that we can get at our enemies rather than cheering on police activity. But like, I totally get how people get there when they've faced like something or some people like this for so long and felt like there was no justice at all, like street justice, police justice, like it's just not happening, right? They seem to have impunity and quite a big platform, right? Or a lot of people are listening to them instead. And like, we don't want that. So I get it. But please don't cheer on cops. It makes me sad.
No, absolutely. And I'm not crazy about the policing. There is certain things and elements in there. And again, I've had some online history with Kareem and myself and my partner, my streaming partner, Dina, who has a much more detailed, as Kareem has been relentless and constantly chatting and talking about Dina as much as possible. including those lawsuits. There is a peace bond that Karima is representing one of the convoyers by the name of Chris Dacey against her, because apparently he feels that he's being harassed by Dina. There was also 2 other recent peace bonds filed against 2 people in Toronto, but the Crown immediately removed them before they even started the entire process. So those were 2 significant losses for them. Yeah, I'm not crazy about discussing generally Karima overall on any of the platforms that I'm on there, whether it be here, whether it be the main show or anything else, because I think it's exactly as you guys, as you were saying, they're seeking recognition, they are seeking to be discussed, and I'm not going to add to that. I'm not going to give them any sound. I'm not going to give them any applications. They want to do it. They're going to have to go do them themselves. And in the process, I'm sure they're going to be recognized for what they are by many people. They usually do eventually.
Yeah, you just hope people get there before they get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the reasons we have talked about folks like that, is just to, red flag them, if nothing else. But yeah, it's certainly to give, it's disheartening to see how many people will repurpose their footage as well. Like, that's problematic. Like, it could be newsworthy, but there's so many other ways you could talk about it without repurposing footage that shows the protesters' faces and whatnot. Yeah, people really have to second guess when they're doing that. Am I missing any disruptive updates? If the comment section, the peanut gallery want to chime in, thanks to Joanna for reminding me. I mean, I think it crossed my mind to put it in the notes at one point and then left because I was like, I hate talking about them. But if the people want it, we will deliver. There's the G7 is coming up. That'll be a bring forward item. There's a People's March for housing that we'll talk about next week. Next week, we'll talk about Bill 5 and Bill 17. We have an activist tip coming up, so, don't leave yet. I'm teasing you with it in the photo there. But Blueprints of Disruption is back. I took a hiatus from that as well, the podcast, the weekly podcast. And the next episode going up is likely going to be, because, shit happens sometimes, with Labor for Palestine, the Ontario education workers that I mentioned briefly in the show earlier. They compiled a report to demonstrate systemic anti-Palestinian racism within all of the school boards, or many of the school boards in Ontario, and what they're doing to fight back against it. 4 of them came into the studio, so it was a lot to juggle, but they had a lot to say. So stay tuned for that, as well as we have the Revolutionary Party. Some members from them are going to come into the studio and talk about forming a new political party that is not the NDP. And a lot of people asked me about that. So I thought we would give you another example of people doing that just under a different banner, and hopefully doing it radically different. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But again, like the ticker along the bottom says, I can't give enough shout outs to specifically the Toronto Community Defense Fund and the Toronto Community Legal Support and the Orange Hats. They have been instrumental in trying to lessen the impact of increased state suppression. So for the Orange Hats, this means documenting police. Some people are raising legal funds. Some people are helping to support folks that are arrested in other ways. And like I said, the Orange Hats are looking to train people on how to legally observe the movement, actions, protests, trends in policing that impact these things. And they put up a helpful little slide here that is kind of Toronto specific, but each community could apply this in their own area once you learn what they mean, right? So team up with legal observers, or just through process, you figure it out. But how to identify TPS vehicles, Toronto Police Service vehicles. So they're mostly pointing to the numbers here on the vehicles that you'll see on every police vehicle, and they give you some information. This information is relevant for a lot of reasons. One, to give to lawyers for a court case, but also more immediately to figure out where your comrade might be going if they are picked up. So the first two numbers on most, I think a lot of cities follow a similar formula, to be honest. But in Toronto, means it's from 55 division. If you can see in the photo, the first two numbers there are 55 and 83. So that's car 83 out of 55 division, which has an address which you can go to and sit outside and do the jail support we were talking about earlier. Wait for comrades to get arrested, greet them with the smoke or food or drink or whatever you think that they would be craving at that point, and to show community presence to the police, right? We know who you have and we're not leaving until you let them go. So one of the benefits of kind of trying to figure out what all these numbers on vehicles mean. Now, sometimes it's important, like before the action starts, to go around the vicinity and try to identify who they've deployed to the action. This obviously you can tell by the type of vehicle, but they've used the codes to show you that this will be mounted police, right? This is, you can see the trailer there in the back. You will have mounted police at this action, or possibly, right? And there's all kinds of other different types of vehicles and divisions where there's a public service unit, court services vehicle, right? Some are specifically tasked with handling protests, and some are notorious for behaving in certain ways, right? So the orange hats, I had them in the studio, and, they could tell you which divisions are more likely to use pepper spray on the crowd, which ones are more likely to use a kettling technique, where they're all coming and what likely division they'll be held in based on the cops that have shown up. So unmarked vehicles, right? So they're talking about ways sometimes, you think it's a cop, you don't know if it's a cop, but there are clues. So some of them use that dark gray on gray. They do actually have a decal. You can kind of see it if you move side to side. They will also have mechanisms within them that you can't see if you look through the windows that will allow the lights to show up. So they're advising you, like, look in the grill here on the vehicle. Is there a light ready to be deployed, or just inside under the windshield or the back window? Is there a bar for lights? That'll help you kind of point out. This helps you know how many cops might be around. And the reality is, sometimes if you organize and you're not arrested at the event, they will track your movements afterwards or sit outside your place of work to harass you. We reported on this on many occasions. And so this is a way to find out if is that really a cop outside my apartment building. I laugh. I'm not trying to make fun, but folks think that sometimes that's the worst torture is you feel like you're being paranoid. You're not so sure, right? Because you see this happening. And that's the whole idea, right? They want people to be scared. But if you're able to identify these things and understand it a little bit more, it won't seem so foreign or daunting. So this is kind of what a mobile command vehicle will look like. They will have different technological capabilities. You got to look back to our cell phone tip episode where we said, like, when you're showing up to events, if you see vehicles like this at a protest, there is a possibility they are going to use things to either track or block your cell signal. And we had all kinds of ways that you can thwart those attempts or at least stay safer. A lot of vehicles, some of these mounted cameras on top of the police vehicles look at license plates, and some of them actually have facial recognition software, right? So they can go up and down a line of cars and like see if anybody has any tickets or, whatever, if they're looking for a vehicle. But they can also use facial recognition software. And we've reported earlier on Ontario police teaming up with Israeli police and using some of their software without any kind of oversight whatsoever. Fun stuff. So this is what I talked about earlier, kind of doing a vehicle inventory to just gather who's there beforehand, because they will disperse afterwards, and then it's too late. So this is just one of the things that legal observers do when they get on site and while they're walking around an event, is just kind of take an inventory of how many, and, you know, if you can get badge numbers and names, obviously that's part of it too, but the vehicles will be clues for your lawyers to use or for the movement to use afterwards. And so that is our activist tip. Do you have anything? I talked for a long time there.
So, it's kind of funny because as soon as I saw the first page, I'm like, I know about this because I discussed this with somebody on Wednesday while we were, wandering around, and because
outside
they were still,
CANSEC.
at CANSEC, because they were also taking a look at the vehicles because they were discussing exactly this. I even saw the front page that you had there, and because we were trying to, they were trying to identify the Ottawa vehicles. And Ottawa's a little bit different. Don't know if you know this, but it's smaller in Toronto, so things are a little bit smaller here. While we do have 3 stations, we have the main one.
Town.
Yeah, we have the main one in Ottawa, downtown on Elgin. Then there is another station out west in the Nepean area, and I believe that's the old Nepean Police. And then there's another one down in Leitrim. But you don't need to worry about where everybody's going to go if they get arrested. It's always the same place. They always get shipped over to Elgin. So there's identifying the vehicles.
That makes it easier.
It does.
Toronto
make it easier.
activists have hell of a time trying to find some of their comrades. Sometimes they'll be taken to 2 different divisions from the single action.
Yep. Ottawa, all the CANSEC ones, nobody had questioned it. Everybody went straight down Elgin Street. We always know it's going to be there. It's always in the same location. I don't think anybody's ever held at any of the other stations. It's pretty much you're going to be there or you're going to be at OCDC. And OCDC tends to be, if you're just arrested, you're going to be at the station. If you're being held over, then you're going to be moved down to OCDC. So it wasn't too much of an issue there. Obviously, there's still vehicles and whatnot. We don't have a mounted division yet, but one is coming in because, yes, somehow we need to have horses in this city.
But you must have mounted police just from the proximity to...
The RCMP does.
They can just operate like on Parliament Hill.
Well, they were didn't
they run people over during the convoy? Who was that? Whose horse was that?
Toronto's.
Oh, you brought in horses. You brought in our
horses.
We
did. So during the action, during the convoy, a lot of people will say or those, a little lost, but the horses, whatnot.
Yeah.
If you actually watch the footage in regards to the what we call the push, the 2 days of the convoy being removed, there was a lot of divisions that were called in, and and as I remember watching that, we identified, aside from Ottawa Police, also OPP. Not surprising. Yesterday, we actually saw both Ottawa Police and OPP in Ottawa during the CANSEC. Not yesterday, sorry, day before.
I have a feeling there was even more divisions there. They've been pulling folks in from nearby municipalities as well.
The badges,
was thinking there was another division there.
Oh, I definitely saw OPP as well as OPS. If there was more divisions, she saw another one. I didn't see it. I'm not disagreeing with her. It's just the 2 I did see.
You guys can fight about it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Pulling in from other places, I wouldn't be overly surprised because, again, for the big push they did for the convoy, they had people aside from Ottawa Police and from OPP. They also, I believe, had. I don't recall RCMP, but I do recall seeing Quebec in there. They had some big people with tinted masks and sticks, which was very Quebec, very Montreal even, as well as I believe they had some either from Vaughan or Peel come into Ottawa, and there was another Ontario division too. So there was quite a few that came to Ottawa when they were doing the final push. So yeah, they will, if it's going to be a large action, they will absolutely call in police from other divisions to come into the city to address stuff. Ottawa's got a bit of a history with that because, again, all the protests happen here. It's the nation's capital. I mean, not to say there's not in Toronto, but Toronto's got their own police force like they can call upon. Ottawa.
And even then, they borrow still, right? The OPP will often be seen down or... we've got a lot of you know, the GTAA is full of police forces, right? Peel, Durham, and York, they all get called in as well for some of the bigger ones because, you know, you showed me some photos and we saw them earlier outside CANSEC of the sheer amount of cops deployed there. And, you know, talking to G, she figured the ratio was like 3 to 1.
She's right.
You know, you don't see all the cops, right? Legal observers are, like we just discussed, kind of trained to inventory how many are possibly there. I would love to have like this calculator where, you know, G could just be like, okay, there's a mounted unit, there's this vehicle, and like how much money is spent at each action by your community, right? So your city hall collecting all those property taxes and whatever other funds they can draw in to try to, you know, sustain the community, and they are spending the bulk of it on policing peaceful demonstrations or anti-war demonstrations. They don't always necessarily maybe be defined as peaceful, and I'm okay with that, but it's a lot of resources being spent. So if the suppression doesn't bother you, I mean, you're on the wrong feed probably, but surely the cost, the sheer cost of this is enough to have folks kind of question these kinds of responses to, you know, 100 peace activists trying to show their disdain with people celebrating war. I don't know. That just seems kind of standard right to demonstrate stuff, you know, war.
This particular photo right here, there's the protesters are a small strip that's just covering the crosswalk between the two sides of the streets. They are flanked and completely encased with at least on both sides behind them, which is what you can see, all the green vests, and on the other side as well as another double line of police on both sides. That's when we start seeing the shoving. And on each side, both on the left and right, there was also another line or two of cops. There was definitely, as you said, 3-1. And based on this view alone, it's hard not to see it. Like, there was an overwhelming amount of police.
Yeah. So this is just going to increase. You have a federal government promising the same bubble laws we talked about. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal to an extent has them. Brampton and Thornhill Vaughan already have them. And also talking about hiring more police officers, about law and order. That was a phrase repeated in the throne speech, and security. And yes, to an extent, they're talking about global security, whatever that means. But the implications are there locally as well, right? Everyone's kind of in that mindset where we are hyping up military and police spending from a well-known Wall Street banker. So much work to do, Joe, which is why we unpack the headlines here amongst comrades every Friday. And on Blueprints of Disruption, we try to share so many examples of how people actually can build power from below and organize towards the things that we tend to ask politicians for. Although that is their job, it's just nice to know that we don't actually need them, and we don't need to favor them. So stay tuned to the podcast. Get inspired by some of the actions that we talk about and the different pressure points people are using to make things happen. And thanks, Joe, for being here another week and holding it down. And I'm going to haunt your lives this week at some point. I got all riled up with that. I enjoyed myself. So watch out.
Cause some more chaos.
Why not?
We usually have, a couple of the people go in there. There's commands that come into the live. So the live that Jess is referring to is a special one I do once in a while, which is when a usual live event occurs. In this case, it was a throne speech. I'll do it live on TikTok for people to come in and watch it. Also discuss it if they want to after. And we'll do it there. But usually, like the evening lives I will do is also a lot more discussion going on there. There's a few more commands, in particular, a new command, which is kick, which got people all excited so that it's not an uncommon thing when it comes to TikTok, where you send a specific gift and you kick somebody off the panel. And so I've got the ability in there for people to do that if they wish. And it's been used quite a bit against particularly some right wingers that come in and just start spewing rhetoric that people get annoyed with and whatnot. So I say that more as a warning.
Yes, you think I'm gonna get booted, don't you?
I'm not saying you will.
I mean,
won't.
If they could have, they would have.
Yeah.
If they could have, they would have. They definitely, once they found out I didn't vote in the last election, they lost their collective minds.
Yeah.
But it was enjoyable nonetheless. Folks should definitely give Joe a follow over on TikTok. To at least be able to haunt his lives like I do.
That's true. It's true. It's always kind of entertaining. If anything, especially the evening lives. At least there's music too. So there's a little bit of music in the background. But yeah, it does get interesting, especially when we get. I like to call it, when the spice comes in, which is usually conservative people coming in there. There's some of them that's kind of interesting because they'll have the actual discussions, debates. There's also some that you'll find that are just. It truly makes you believe that these people might be bots because they just spew rhetoric, nothing else but rhetoric. And like, all right, you want to believe said rhetoric, back it up. I'm even starting to see right now, Pierre is going to be the leader. He's going to be the prime minister. I'm like, you realize we just finished an election. You guys told us he was going to be prime minister. That didn't happen. You're going to have to understand why I'm not believing you now, since you said it before and didn't happen. But yeah, so there is very much, and it's one of those things I try to watch for, is kind of patterns and flows with these guys as to what their next focus is. And again, I'm also very much the guy who's not going to be pro Carney. I'm going to be watching him. But these guys are coming in and saying like, "Oh, Carney's failing. He's done this, and he's completely lost on that." I'm like, listen, he hasn't. This is the first week he sat down. I'm not saying, again, I'm going to be criticizing him for stuff he's done, but I need him to do something first. That's all. Like you guys want to be taken seriously, just criticize something he's done. If you want to talk about some of the stuff in his past, sure, we can discuss that. I want to talk about some stuff, but if you're telling me he's failed the entire negotiations with Trump, I'm like, yeah, it hasn't really gone through. And I'm like, you guys are so busy on simping for your team that it's dishonest.
And they're in a tough spot too, conservatives in Canada. I don't pity them, fuck them, but Carney is the prime minister they wish they could have had. Right, he is going to enact conservative fiscal policies. Oh, they may not admit it. But they are going to watch him do things that they were cheering for. Right, he's going to essentially enact the conservative platform, save for some of the more hateful social items on there. Perhaps not. Who knows what he'll placate to? But economically speaking, they're going to vote. They're going to have to vote with it. They're not even be able to be on record against some of these reforms that are going to be pro-capital, right? They're going to have to support these publicly, or at least shut the fuck up and not criticize them, because they're the position of their overlords as well, right? Their capital, their investors, and all of that. So it's they're going to have to really stretch it. So either I think maybe they should just sit back and regroup for a while. Not that I want you to take my advice. I mean, crash and burn all you like, but Carney isn't going to give you much to chew on. Conservatives, we us crazy left wingers will have our hands full. But yeah,
it's going to be interesting to watch, because again, I'm going to be monitoring the commentaries quite a bit, because exactly your point is very much so. I mean, again, we've said this many times. I've said this also in many other venues. Carney is very, very close to as conservative as you can get. Dressed in red, but let's be honest here, liberals and conservatives are not that different. And this is sometimes a heated discussion, even to tell to people who are liberal, because like, what do you mean they're not? Pierre is completely different. This, I'm like, yeah, but you're looking. If you back up, you take a look. The difference is not that big. Yes, maybe when it comes to the social issues, what I call the really cheap things in regards to economics, like like the trans rights. Capital doesn't give a shit about that. Capitalism gives a shit about that. They don't give a shit about women's rights. They don't give a shit about any of that. That's cheap shit that they can keep you busy with. And so, yeah, you're right. These things, should we have women's rights and LGBTQ rights and racial rights? Absolutely. Liberals fight for those, sort of. Yeah. And in ways, Trudeau did do some good, some good there. Is Carney going to protect them? Yes. But once you peel that particular layer off, then you take a look in regards to the capital policies, conservatives and liberals, yeah, they're not that different, which means it's going to be interesting to watch commentaries as to what are they going to be criticizing. Because those social issues, Carney's not going to be working much on those. He's going to be working on the capital ones. And you're right. There is not that much difference between the two.
No. It'll be business as usual on the Hill for the most part. But yeah, and we'll be back to our business as usual on Friday.
Absolutely.
Until then, what do I say? Keep on disrupting, folks. Smash that status quo. Have a good week.